Fingers crossed, eyes crossed, and let's see what happened. Oh, hit the button. No, that wasn't it. Um, where are you? Can you see my screen?
Right.
You see PowerPoint?
Yeah,
Okay.
I see the wheel.
Okay, there's the wheel. All right, so I'm in the right place. It's just not showing on my computer the same. So I wanted to go back to this diagram, the adolescent development clock, I call it. And I really, and I don't think I sent it, but I'll make sure that Katie gets a copy of this specifically to send out to you all, because this really gave me lots to think about as an educator, as a youth champion, as a hope dealer, when I consider the work that I'm doing with not just young people, but very often their families who might be experiencing that trauma, drama, and pain. I think it might have been Mr. Cameron early on who talked about how sometimes we don't recognize those things, and we have a professional lens that we have. But if we have the ability to look a little deeper and understand the other things that might be going on that may be triggering or creating the responses that we get, it may give us the pause to take a deep breath and sit in those difficult places longer instead of just reacting like we have the absolute authority to react and refuse to accept that kind of behavior, but to look a little deeper and see if there might be a place for us to engage. Maybe we will be the ones to restart that clock and help recoup some time and to alleviate or at least mitigate some of the trauma. Using social emotional learning tools to really engage young folks, finding ways to give them creative outlets. What you all know, like I do, is many of the young folks that you serve have amazing creative talent, uh, but they're not usually the things that we focus on because they have all these other things that pop up in front of us. But if we can find a way to at least draw those talents and gifts into the conversation, it may give them another outlet. For me, it was the opportunity to write and then to act. You all probably read in the last chapters we read about my debut on the stage in seventh grade, and it was one of the most amazing moments of my life. And if that simple line, I can feel it in my bones. It's going to be a razzle dazzle day. I nailed that line, and I slipped on the imaginary ice, and as all those envelopes fell around me and the audience erupted, it was the first time in my experience that number of young people erupted it, and it was positive, right? It was usually because there was a fight in the cafeteria, or I just a teacher called me out in class to read, knowing that I couldn't read, and I was finding the person closest to me that I could hit, because I'd rather be that mad crazy boy instead of that stupid boy who can't read. And for the first time, I got all this attention and energy because of something that I did that wasn't negative, that actually brought something. And so finding ways for young people to express and explore those things are powerful gifts. And I encourage you to continue to seek those as you develop the ways you engage with them in the classroom and in the other work you do. I'm going back just a little bit, just to give you a frame. That's me in my butterfly collar and polyester suit, looking really good for third grade pictures. Uh, my childhood started out really amazing and then took turns like so many of the young folks that we experience. And when I look back and investigate the work that we do, I realize that my story is just another story, but there's so many young folk that you see every day who can check off as many of these lines as I have and more. And I think that our ability to continue to see them in spite of all those challenges as young people with possibility, remember the conversation of our present and our possible, if we can see and really hold where they are now and still imagine, still believe with them in what's possible. It's not just that fantastical belief that we sometimes get caught up in when people just say it's just wishing, but it's imagining with purpose, because the work that we do is then to help them and guide them, to the things that might allow them to get to those places. And so we're not just leaving them out there. It's not false hope. It's not us pretending with them. but coming up with some thoughts and then really rapid action testing those to see if we can get to something that sticks, something that they can find some traction with. Um, and I think of the transitions with myself and my brothers in particular, um, the, the, the difficulty that so many of the young folks that we serve have in walking away from who they are into who they dream of being. And there's so much fear attached to that. As a young man, as this young man, nobody would have ever imagined that I was afraid because there was nothing on the streets that scared me. The biggest fear I had was actually trusting the folks like you that showed up every day to tell you who I really wanted to be and to ask you to help me figure out how that person lived inside of this person until this person was no longer useful to me, necessary in my day-to-day survival. My brothers Derek and Sean are two of the cornerstones of my story and my life, both for what they taught me and what they gave me, but also the lessons I learned by making the decision to walk in a different direction. How hard it is to walk alone when you have tied so much of your survival with other people. And you all will see this often. You do see this often. Young people who are conflicted, who are torn by the world that helped them survive to finally get into your face, into your space where you can convince them of something else, and then walking away from that. And as you can see, even in the last chapter, this was not a clean break. You know, it took me 20 years of trying and wanting to be something different to become fully imagined in someone different. Uh, and I didn't give up on my brothers, and I haven't. I speak to Derek at least once a week, and we talk about what could have been and his brilliance, and he is amazing. He is brilliant even today. But understanding and having people around me who were able to show me that the best I could do for him is to do for me. And maybe if my life was better one day, then I could actually be useful and productive to him. But you're going to have, and you do have students who are struggling with that. And it's not a conversation that goes well when you say, well, you just need to get rid of all those people, because it's not as easy as it sounds. But your ability to understand and to help them really walk through where they're trying to get to and how they get there and who's going to be a part of that. And sometimes those same folks that they're tied to want for them as much as they want for themselves, and being able to connect them to that is important. You know, when Derek called me as I was getting my go bag together to go back in the middle of my final success at Berea, everything working for me, and told me that, you know, he was not my job, you know, that he was making choices as a grown man and I needed to handle my business and stop being him. That was the kind of freedom that you don't always get when you're tied into groups like that, into associations. Usually it's ride or die, and not, you know, rise and fly. And Derek and Sean were always really good at that. And so finding ways to encourage the young folk you're with to seek out and to see where the people around them really want them to be great. Because I think that there really is, even in those caustic relationships at times, there are places where people want to see growth. You know, we kept each other alive literally, air in lungs and hands on hearts. And I don't believe they ever were malicious in the sense that they wanted me, you know, it wasn't the crabs in the pot syndrome where they wanted to have more people on the plate beside them than somebody escaping the pot. But it's sometimes hard to verbalize that in the environment that a lot of young folks grow up in. And so our helping to frame that is important. I wanted to share some thoughts about the Hope Dealer's Handbook. I've been working on this project here for the last little bit and really codifying some of the thoughts. And I'm going to go quickly. I only have a few slides. I usually have about 85 slides, which is ridiculous. But I just wanted to share and walk you through some of the things that have really solidified in my mind and my work as I've had the chance to really engage with hope dealers like you all from across the country and around the world, and thinking about the lessons, particularly of Dr. Lorraine Wilson and my mother, Alice Lovelace, and all the others who stepped in and chose to be there. The insanity principle, is you keep doing what you've been doing, you keep getting what you've been getting. Remember that 2 + 2 is always going to be 4. No matter how much you pray for something different, until you put a different equation in, nothing changes. But very often in the work that we do, we have this static principles, or these procedures that have never quite worked, but we know them pretty well. And sometimes we have to be the ones to step outside and try to do some things differently. Maybe it's the creative engagement. Maybe it's creating some space for families to be connected differently. It looks different in place, but it's our being creative. But I think it's interesting is John Maxwell actually said it better. He says, if you keep doing what you've always done, competition gets better and you get worse results. For a long time, we've looked at this as a zero-sum game. Like, if we just keep the status quo, everything's going to be okay. But actually, we continue to lose out and erode our results when we do that. And our competition is fierce. Our competition is still gang violence and gang allegiance. It's still teen pregnancy. It's still high school dropout. It's still lifetime incarceration. It's all of the negatives that come. And all of those systems, drug abuse and everything that comes with them, all those systems have innovated. In the last 20 years that I've been in this work, and you all can attest to this, all of those systems have gotten more creative, have gotten more engaged in how they try to siphon our children off, our young people. And if we're continuing to do the same work we've always done, it's going to be hard for us to challenge systems that are creating other ways to convince our young folk that they can provide for them the family, the encouragement, and the kind of things that they need to really be great. And so we have to innovate and continue to get creative, and we have to raise the bar. I'm going to ask you to refuse to allow your classroom to become the place where dreams go to die. I have experienced educational places that don't love children, and everything about them hurts, even 50 years later, and I think that the thing that we can commit to is to make sure that every day a young person is in our space, we are doing our best to give them something better to see. There's no guarantee. You can't make them want better. You can't make them walk away from who they have been or believe that they could be something else. But the space is so important. And the space is the thing that really was there for me. And hospice is not a substitute for hope. And I say this, and I'm going to tell you, I visited a facility once, and they were talking about the amazing birthday parties they had for the young men that were there. And they were like extravagant, like quinceañeras. I mean, they were like super birthday parties. And so I asked them, well, why do you all have these amazing parties? And they were like, well, Commissioner, they don't have, these kids don't get these kind of parties, and their lives are rough. And I thought that was great. So, but I kept pressing. I said, so, but why do you think that now is the time to really, to be throwing this big celebration? And somebody stopped and looked at me and said, well, Commissioner, we really want to give them something exciting and a memory, because chances are they're not going to live much longer. And it struck me that there's some place in our system where we might be thinking our job is to give somebody a great end-of-life experience at the age of 16. And I thought that was unacceptable, that we have to hold out and believe that the work that we do will garner them more than a couple more years of hard life with a good birthday party memory. And so I want to encourage you to not sink into the false narrative that you are creating the best moment in their life. In fact, I want you to refuse to allow this to be the best moment in their life, and to start working with them toward what that next thing might be. I'm not going to go through all of these. I wanted to share the alligator again. The question is, when is it okay to finally give up? And as a hope dealer, we don't give up when we get tired. We give up when the gator gets tired. And the gator don't seem to get tired. So we have to keep digging deeper and looking for the energy to really push and to keep hold of them as long as we can. I mean, there will be a time when you're not responsible for them because they move on either forward or back, however they choose and engage. But in the time that they're with you, the commitment to staying committed is pretty powerful. There's an old saying that says the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. It's a Chinese proverb, and I always thought that spoke to the system that we're in. We can always look back and talk about what somebody else should have done. If they had done that, then we wouldn't be dealing with the problem. I used to, as Commissioner of Juvenile Justice, it was kind of perfect because everybody had to fail for us to get somebody, right? And so I could blame the courts, I could blame the cabinet, I could blame the schools, I could blame the parents, I could blame childcare. And so it's a great place to be when you don't have to own any responsibility for what happens next because somebody else should have done something. And it finally struck me that maybe I needed to shift that. Maybe instead of worrying about what didn't happen then that caused this, I should be worried about what happens next to ensure it doesn't continue. The rest of that proverb is the second best time to plant a tree is right now. And the truth is we're always in a right now. And so just because these other systems failed and now these young people are with you doesn't give us permission to just back away because in 20 years, we want to make sure that we're not the next one somebody's looking at going, gosh, if they would have done some amazing work, we wouldn't be dealing with this right now. And so I think it's important to keep pushing. This guy, this guy in England during World War II said some things about refusing to bow to the Nazi regime. And Winston Churchill stood there in this small country surrounded by the Nazi war machine that was taking over the world. And when they came through and said, hey, you know, you guys look like us, you're a lot like us in culture. All you have to do is roll over and join the team, throw up the gang sign and speak the secret words and you're part of us. If you don't, we're going to destroy everything, you know, your language, your buildings, your art, all the things that you value, and your whole civilization will be destroyed. And as nation after nation rolled over and joined the Nazi war machine in fear of losing themselves, Great Britain said, no, we will stand and we will fight. And when we fight, we'll most likely die, but everyone watching will know we deserve victory. Pound for pound, swing for swing, heart for heart. There's no doubt that we would destroy you, but for a force you have that's beyond our control. The first time I saw this sign, I was like, wow, that's what it is. That's what I see every day in these hope dealers that wade into the battle with our young people, the deserving of victory. They carry themselves and you push yourselves into the work, knowing that you might not win today, but because you were there should have been a victory. It's like when the Cats play. And I know I saw some Cards fans out there, but you know, when your team is playing and they have that amazing year and everything works right, they get to the dance and somehow the other team just on that day had more. But we tune in next year in October for March Madness, right? Well, I mean, for the start of the year, because we know this year might happen. So deserving victory is that whole sense that you put everything in, and you know that because you put everything in, there's a good chance to win. But if not, you know you can come back tomorrow and do it again. That's the energy we should be carrying into the work that we do. And I appreciate from what I know of you, and I know a lot of you I've worked with and had a chance to visit with. This is the attitude that carries us through the day. So I'm going to take a deep breath if I can find you all again. I'm assuming you all are still there because if not, this will be very embarrassing bit of time. And I would like to, I really don't know what I would like to do because I've lost total control of my computer. I still see some of you, so I know you're there. I'm just trying to figure out tech. Very interesting. Okay, now I see you. Oh, no. I did something. Wait. Okay, I think I did. All right. I saved myself. So I wanted to share those thoughts with you and some of those to consider. And I would like to just take a few minutes to see if so there are questions. I've received some questions, and I've been taking questions and trying to address them as we have been going through this process. But I wanted to make sure that I left a little time today to address any lingering questions, any that didn't make sense, or I'm ADHD, and so it's possible that I started a sentence 3 weeks ago and totally didn't finish it. And so I wanted to leave a little space today to see if there might be questions that I can address, or thoughts that you have some thinking on that you might want to discuss just a little bit, and see if there's some space for that. I mean, you don't have to talk or type anything. I can I can do a couple lines from one of my shows if I need to, but if you have some questions, I'm happy to. If you have some questions, you can put them in the chat box, um, or you can unmute and throw it out there. We've got a little time, but don't all speak at once. Only rule. Here's a great question. Do I think the work on Senate Bill 200 has met its mark? And yes and no. I think that it has started. And I tell you what was really interesting. Our first session, somebody mentioned a Senate bill kid. And I thought that, and it really struck me. And I think it was Judy. Was it Judy? Am I right, Judy? I think it was. But so, and it really struck me that was one of those unintended responses, right? I've heard, and I've had a chance to meet with folks since then, and I've heard a lot of challenges. But I think that when I heard that, the idea that now that young people know that the system isn't going to keep them past a certain point, they could just kind of dig in and wait you out. And that really struck me. And so I've actually been giving that some thought since I heard her mention that. For me, it really has struck me as one of the challenges that we still have to face. And I think as a juvenile justice leader, nationally, I continue to try and to work on how do we build in processes that allow us to, because so I think that part of it is where relationship comes in, right? We're going to have to be much more reliant on building relationship and connection, social emotional connections, in order to convince them, because there's this outside force that's like, oh, dude, just 90 days, hold on, right, and we'll be back. And so, and I really think that that's going to be a big challenge, but it totally, I wrote it down. So it's one of the things that I'm actually, you got me thinking, because we have to actually strategize about this, because again, all those systems are adjusting as quickly as we do. And so somebody else saw that and go, oh, cool. If we can convince our guys to go in there and to just stay hard for 90 days instead, then we can get around it. And so that piece, I'm working on that. But I think that the big pieces of Senate Bill 200 that I'm excited about is that we do have the ability to keep young people from going as deep into the system. The part that I haven't recognized yet is the work that we do for young people outside of the system to keep them. Right? I think the caveat when I was in this fight was that, there was this huge, I think I talked about in the last section, we read this whole huge piece around how it was going to destroy the work of juvenile justice. And the argument that I kept putting forward, and I believe wholeheartedly, is that, you know, this wasn't about a downsizing. There was no intention in any of my work that we would need fewer people, but more. But they would have to be more focused, and the work would have to be back in the community, right? Building relationships with families and service providers, making sure that young people were supported getting to and from court and to school, and those types of things that really allow for us to do our work, I think, better. All of the data tells us that young people that cross the threshold of a secure center, a detention center, or facility immediately have a reduction in their prospects. I mean, immediately. And so if we want to do our best work, the time that they spend behind those doors needs to be short, targeted, and intentional, which means that the work that we do has to be specific and targeted at getting them fixed in the situation that they're in, and not worrying about trying to make them great people. And I say that because, right, teenagers are pains in the butt, right? We had a whole system that was trying to make teenagers not be pains in the butt. And I was like, wait a minute, but it's like their job. And so if we're extending them every time they do something stupid, then right, we really are handicapping ourselves in so many ways. And so removing things like, they have to be nice. They have to not be disrespectful, but they don't have to be nice. Um, I wasn't a nice teenager. That's probably not a good example. I'm sure some of you probably weren't nice teenagers too, or maybe some days at least. But I think that Senate Bill 200 took out some of the ambiguity, so that we're specifically focused on, or I'm sorry, I don't. We should be specifically focused on what brought them to us, and if we can address that, put them back out. And it's just like the recycle improvement that we do in corporations, right? Put it back out and test it. If it doesn't work, then we can see and we can figure out where to go. But if we keep them for 3 years without testing it, then they turn 18 and they leave. We don't get another chance to fix the product before it leaves the line. And so I think that having chances to move them out of system and back in the community with support is important. And that's the work that we continue to work with. I think the challenge is making sure they have the appropriate support at home to actually help them. Because here's the thing, and I think one of you talked about this. It might have been Jeremy, right? You were talking about the idea that as soon as they leave you all, they wind up back in alternative school. And when I first had this conversation with a school superintendent, it blew my mind. I said, we have taken this young person, we have spent 6 months giving them the best counseling, the best education in small classrooms, and access to all the things to make them a model student. We've recovered grades, they are ready. And the first thing you do is bring them back to your school and reward them by sending them to the alternative school with the kids who are about to come to us, right? And they can't be in any sports, they can't be on the band, they can't be, and so the incentive, right, is ridiculous. And so the argument that I keep pushing, and I think that you all, is that when the kids leave you, when these students leave you, they are ready to go back into mainstream classrooms. And that is a promise that they're excited about. That's why they're going through this and doing the things that we ask them to do. And the first thing that happens when they get back is they get put back in a box and told that they really haven't done anything impressive and nobody cares that they've changed. And we see them again because, and so those are the pieces that still frustrate me. That even though we've made these adjustments here, there are external systems that all connect to the young people we serve who refuse to see and value them differently once they've gone through this experience. And so it's just like what we see with adult incarceration, when you serve a 20-year sentence and then you come out and you still have to, be incarcerated for life because there are places you can't go. You haven't really paid your debt. And so I think there's some part of that in us as a society where we have to really figure out our forgiveness um, as a truth of who we are, not a conversation we continue to have that doesn't hold the weight. And you all see it like I do, young people who walk away from your tutelage and your support fired up about the world. And in no time at all, they are convinced that, you know, they should go back. And that's when those other forces get to come back in and say, see, I told you. And those are words I hated. But see, I told you those people weren't going to just let you be different. See, I told you that, you know, you weren't going to be able to, you know, you need to come back over here and do what you do because, you know, so my brother Sean used to say, them people ain't going to let you be great. You don't get to be great. We don't get to be great in this world. And I think that's a disservice that we continue to do. Um, what do you mean by keeping young people from going deep into the system? I, I, I think that where we are, where you all are, is kind of the slippery front door into the system of long-term incarceration. And so I think that uh, when I look at the trajectory of so many young folks, once they walk through that door, people are already starting to say things like, you know where you're going to be in 10 years. So there's some assumptions about um, the continual track into adult incarceration, into a life of criminality. Um, and I think that keeping young people in the shallows, addressing their challenge right now, and then moving them back out into the community where they can be held responsible to their community is important. So when I talk about moving deeper into the system, I talk about not just the physical part of it, but the mental part of a young person who continues to see themselves as a part of an institution, not as a part of a community. And and it's real, you know. Many of you have probably seen, like I have, young people who are days away from walking back out the doors of the residential facility, and they do some random attack on a staff, or they go off on one of the other youth because they're so afraid of the world outside that doesn't have those controls. So I think at some point you get okay with controls because you don't have to guide yourself anymore. And I think that institutionalized thinking is really what drives a lot of young folks further in. I have this conversation with my brother Derek quite a bit here lately about the institutionalized mind and the young people who he sees even now. You know, he's an old head, right? He's been in 25 years, and but he talks about these young guys that come in who want the system to do all the work, you know, and they're okay with it. And I think that, you know, we have to try not to let our young folks get comfortable being under command and control so much that they lose the desire to direct their own lives and to move forward in the world. You know, just gonna let me keep talking here. It's just yammering like an old dude.
I'll jump in, Hassan, if you don't
Okay,
mind.
please.
Um, One of the things that you said today actually really struck me, and it was the idea that in juvenile justice, when you were there, some of the thought processes that you had of we didn't place kids here. It was somebody else has let them down along the path, and so maybe DCBS or maybe their parents or the school system or a lot of other people. I think it really struck me because, gosh, as I'm reflecting, I mean, I'm just going through this and learning with you, is I've said those same kinds of things. I have, as kind of a state leader in the education system with our kids and with our programs across the state, I've often said, we didn't assign kids to our programs.
Mhm.
We're not the ones who put kids here. And so especially when we talk about disproportionate minority contacts within our systems, and we're right now just getting ready to put out our most recent demographic profile of our students, and it continues to demonstrate that we have disproportionate minority contact with all of our systems. We have in the state, there's about 10.5% minority students in the state's education system. In our programs, we have 23% of our kids are identified as a racial minority. And I often point that out in our research and in our presentations of saying, this needs to be addressed. Somebody somewhere, it's not, and I often will say, we serve whoever you send to us. Like we serve in all of our programs, we serve whoever you send us. We don't assign kids here. We are not responsible for putting kids in our programs. We just serve whoever you send. And it really, I think to me, as I'm thinking through this, is really a crutch in a lot of ways that we can wash our hands of responsibility. We didn't create this. Instead of maybe that mindset that you're talking about, that we need to be thinking of what do we do now? How do we address that? How can we, from our perspectives, then have some impact on this? And how do we address this when we technically are not the people who are placing kids? Like, what's our role in that? And so you've really given me some food for thought today of how we think about that. So thank you.
Well, thank you for that feedback, Ronnie. And I think that was the hardest thing for me because, I was doing that too, right? For a long time, that was our mantra. And so the question became, it became a yes and, right? Because that is our truth. And once we realize that, what are we going to do next? Right? Part of it is calling out the systems for what they are. We're still dealing with the children that come to us, but when we report every year, we still need to be reporting that there's disproportionality. And we need to be looking at how we dismantle that. One of the things that I started, working on, and moving a system is hard, but the conversations that you start with are important. When we would have these updates and we would look at our pop sheets and I ask the questions, well, why are these? Well, the commission, the courts send them to us, and this is what we do. And then my question would be, well, let's look a little further, right? Because the courts send them to us, but then we do our processing with them, and inside of our system, right, the students that stay the longest are still students of color. The students that go from group home to secure to detention, are still, each one of those segments becomes a larger part. And so there are parts that we could look at ourselves and go, oh yeah, actually that's us. They all came to us, but then we had that discretion to decide, when somebody was acting right or when their behavior was appropriate. And disproportionately, behaviors, were appropriate and inappropriate based on the color of your skin. And so that was the hard part that I had to own, and that we have to own, is that there's a point in there where we have to look, once we got past the initial lens, what are we still doing? When kids go home, who are the ones being revoked and sent back more often, and for what? And those became questions that left a lot of big ahas. And so, but yeah, it's that getting over the first part, which is such a convenience, and it made me sleep well at night, Ronnie, to be able to say it wasn't my fault. It did. And those of you who are in juvenile justice, if you know, those last couple of years that I was commissioner, things got pretty hectic, and the whole system was kind of in turmoil because I couldn't sleep anymore, because I finally realized, just like you, Ronnie, said, oh, wait a minute, right? That's not an acceptable answer for someone who's supposed to be a champion for children, right? If our job really is to make sure that every child is safe, supported, and on a clear path to success in some way, then I have to do more than say, well, gosh, this is the way it was yesterday. But it's not an easy pill to swallow as a leader to understand that, what does that saying go? When you point a finger, remember 3 are looking at you, right? It's like, oh, right, but yeah, it's that's the work. I think that's the work that we have to continue to stay mindful of. What else? We got a little more time. I want to see if I can answer any lingering questions. Or
Yeah, I just had a comment. I thought it was very powerful, and it's also kind of it can almost be like a daily meditation of sorts for yourself before you go into the classroom. How crazy is it for us to expect perfection? I thought that was a powerful statement. You know, you can have expectations and hopes and desires that you try to build into your kiddos that, you know, mirroring what you just said a few minutes ago, that eventually you hope that they own themselves.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, you know, I'm going to hope for you. I'm going to hope for you. I'm going to hope for you. But I have to be willing to forgive when you don't meet my expectations. And that's, I think that's hard, especially when you're in, you know, February 2nd and there haven't many snow days, and you're in that mean season, and you've seen that same kid and they've had the same excuse or the same argument or the same need for attention or power or whatever.
yeah,
And you've been fighting it. But how powerful is it, you know, to have that? And I think that's something we'll institute this year is hope for perfection, don't expect it. And then just, you know, re-guide. I think, you know, that really hit home with me today, because I think at times, even with my own kids, you know, I have to watch that, you know, that perfectionism, because it's not accurate. You're right. Teenagers are teenagers.
yeah. Thanks,
Jeremy, I agree with you 100%, because so many of our kids don't come from a place at home where every day's a new day. You know, so many of our kids hear, well, you've always done this and you've always done that and you've always been a disappointment. And so to have a place where they could come and maybe learn that every day is a new day, that if we can foster that, I think that's fantastic, because many of our kids don't get that opportunity from home.
That's a good point, Angie. And thank you for that. Oh, there's a question. Do you think that programs that catered to taking students at risk of future incarceration by visiting jails and meeting with prisoners for a day are effective? So, Trish, no. It's really interesting because those scared straight programs get so much traction, and the legislators were like clamoring for them for a long time. But here's the thing: when we were doing our data for Senate Bill 200, when we were doing do you know that scared straight programs were the only? I mean, from everything from, you know, MST and functional family therapy all the way down to doing nothing, that scared straight programs were the only ones that actually had a negative indicator. It said that young people going through it actually had a greater chance of going to jail than if you just left them alone and did nothing after they did that first thing. And I'll tell you, I actually did a visit in Maryland. I was up there visiting, and so I did a prison visit with a group, with a scared straight group, and it was disturbing in a lot of ways to sit there and, you know, you've seen those interactions, they get kind of, and a young man jumped up and straight up started to challenge these guys, like, I ain't scared of you, and so it just really, it unraveled pretty quickly, and I got to see firsthand that because even the data from the shows, if you track those shows, they talk about, you know, a month later they'll go back and look at the young people. A lot of those year out for those same young people, the results are much less exciting. And so actually, so I don't think that the idea of visiting, you know, the idea of visiting in prison and saying, look, this is where you're going to be if you don't straighten up, doesn't work. The adolescent brain don't work like that, right? Because it's more likely to go, you know what? They ain't seen nobody like me, so I'm ready for them. So it just doesn't fit with the science of the brain, because it's a total challenge to their sense of self, and their sense of self is pretty strong. We will be in this conversation, right? And so I think that overall, those are a big fail. They're really good TV, but they're a big fail. And that's why I think really the work that you all do, coming back to the conversation I started with, building those relationships, creating those moments where young people can let down their guard, and it takes some time. But I mean, those really do take us a much closer to the place where we want to get with them, and as far as convincing them that there's something better for them in the future than right now. But yeah, but thanks for that question, because that's real, and a lot. And like I said, we had legislators were telling us that it was going to have to be a part of Senate Bill 200. We're going to have scare straight programs, and I was like, fighting behind the scenes every time they have one of those conversations. Like, we cannot put these words in this paper, right? I even did a presentation to them where I showed them all the data and said, look, it literally says, this program does more damage to children, communities, and families. And finally, they let it go. But I don't think they believed me. They just said, they didn't want to fight about it anymore because, data. But, somebody told me, well, Commissioner, it seems to me you can make data say anything you want it to say. And I said, well, yes, Senator, I guess that might be true. So how about if you take the data we have right here, and tomorrow you come back and make it say that our kids in the Commonwealth are doing great? Because if you can do that, then I'll believe you. But right now, I always say it's the BAD, the BAD, the best available data. And the thing that we have to do is work with our best available data. And then if we get new data, we can get new action. But right now, we have to act on what we have. The data we have right now says, no, that's not what we need to be doing.
Hassan?
Go ahead.
Yeah, hi, son. This is Jeff. I got a question for you. What are your feelings on the Bluegrass Academy? I know you are an Army veteran. What do you feel about like a boot camp type? Have we seen any effectiveness? I think it's the Bluegrass Academy in Kentucky on that program. And what are your feelings on that?
Jeff, I think that it's a good program. I've actually had a chance to go and visit with the cadets and say and have conversation. I tell them my story, and we talk some. I think that the challenge of it is that what I like about it, I'll start with that, is at the same time they're doing physical conditioning, which in my experience is really important. Right? That was one of the things that I learned early on could actually lower my anxiety and sharpen me as a kid with ADHD, right? It's burning off enough of that energy in my brain. And so that intense physical conditioning and the education supports they have, I thought have always been top notch. So I think that's very valuable. My biggest challenge is that you have to be above a certain threshold to go, right? So most of the kids that qualify to wind up, in many of our programs have already crossed that threshold. My military experience gave me a lot of insight about myself into what I wanted to do and what I didn't want to do, right? And so I think there was a lot of clarity that comes from that experience. And I think overall, I'll just say more broadly, the idea of service changed me. And I think that if we can get young people in the mind of service, and maybe they step from the academy into serving their country in some capacity, it changed me dramatically in the sense of what I expected. Right? As soon as I raised my hand and said, "This I solemnly swear to defend," all of a sudden I had expectations. Right? Because if I'm going to put my life on the line, right, it's the same expectations I had for my brothers and my boys at home. Right, that they were going to watch out for me. But now, Uncle Sam owed me something. If I'm going to give my blood, there should be something. And so I think that in a really strong way, when young people make that commitment, it also gives them more leverage to believe they deserve more. Right. And so I think there's some real value there. But I've worked with NG programs, academies in a couple of other states, and I think that they're a good foundation. But again, it's about that human touch in addition to, right, having someone scream like a drill sergeant, also having those strong counselors and those strong educational supports that really help them move the needle and get where they want to be next.
Okay, I appreciate that. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. We've got a couple of minutes left. I wanted to I was going to try and share my screen again, but I don't know if that's safe. But I'm going to try it. All right. Hold on. Let's see if that works. Y'all see anything? You still see Churchill? Okay, good. All right. So Johann Wolfgang von Goethe once said that if you treat a man as he is, he will remain as he is. But if you treat a man as he can and should be, he will become as he can and should be. I remember the first time that I read this quote, I was like, dude, my mom reads Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, right? Because, I mean, that's what she's been doing my whole life. She's been looking at me in my present and my possible. Our ability to look at the young people we serve and still imagine all the amazing things that could be and to express those gives them a counter narrative. It gives them another look at possible that may not even show itself in your place, right? They may tell you get out their face because they ain't hearing all that. But when the chips are down, when they find themselves in that dark, dark corner, you know, like I did, staring down the sight of my brother's Uzi, trying to imagine that I could be something else. In those dark moments where they have to make a choice, the only thing that we can guarantee is that they have choices, that they have voices, right? If all the voices I heard were the ones telling me that I was a monster, a thug, I was trash, I was useless, I was broken, I guarantee you in that moment, looking down that barrel, there would have been no problem with waiting for the trigger to squeeze. But because I had other voices and other visions in my head, somebody else to just show me a difference, I had to make that choice. They're still going to have to make the choice, but your ability to give them another choice is crucial. And I think that that's the piece that has driven me in the work and in the last few years is really wanting to show and appreciate that you all are the ones creating that choice so many times. I say that you wade into the battle every day, holding the line between harm and hope to create the possibility, not the guarantee, that because you acted, tomorrow will be better for some young person. And I think that's the thing that drives me every day in this work. And the last thing I'd like to ask you to do, and it's the question I asked at the beginning, is I want you to take care of yourself. You know, we need you in this fight for the long haul. This battle won't be finished in the day. You know, the world didn't break our kids in a day, and we're not going to unbreak them in a day. But you have to take care of yourself along the way. You know, you can't be 100% in for them because you need something for you and your family in order to make going back into the work worth it. And I know that burnout is a real thing, and the expectations that are there for you all the time are real. But carve out a space, create partnerships, look on the screens and look at the other folks doing this work. Find allies and folk that you can talk to, that you can vent with, and give yourself some practices like hiking in the woods or binge watching. I think that's what Katie said, binge watching some Netflix. But just take care of yourself because we need you to be in this for the long run. This is a battle, and everybody's needs to be all hands on if we can make it happen. I've lost my screen again. So Ronnie, if you can take over while I figure out where my screen went.
There we go. Well, we just want to thank you, Hassan, for sharing the last 4 weeks with us, for sharing your journey with us. I think a journey that a lot of us recognize, not just in the students we're serving, but also many of us in the lives that we've also lived in working through this. So thank you for sharing that journey in such a personal way. We appreciate your time. And in addition to sharing that journey, really having some open, honest dialogue with all of us about how we can be hope dealers for our kids, what that looks like. and being responsive to kind of helping us find our own journey and responding to our students' needs. So thank you for that. We appreciate you being here. I hope everybody has really enjoyed the opportunity to come together as much as I have. So I thank you all for all being here, for the work that you do, as Hassan said, for the work you do every day for our students, and being a difference maker for them. So we appreciate everything you're doing. Thank you for being here. We look forward to seeing you again soon. And please keep your eyes open for that evaluation that'll be able to get your credit for this as well. So thank you, Mr. Davis. Appreciate you
Thank
being
y'all.
here.
I appreciate y'all.
Appreciate your encouraging
Doing
work.
great work.
Thank you, everybody, for being here, and we will see you soon.
Take care of yourselves. Have a great week. Bye.
Bye-bye.